ฟังTak.
So we're now going to contrast Tiger 131 with what the Germans pretty much started the war with. This is the Panzer III. Now this particular model, the L model of the Panzer III, they go through, start with the A, B, C, as you can imagine, as they go through different variations of the tank. This L model has a 5cm or 50mm gun on it. And you can see again, just the sheer scale of difference between this type of tank that started design in the mid-1930s using some components that the Germans had been researching and testing in secret, unlike the Russians out of Kazan in Soviet Russia. They had real difficulties in the 1930s, the Germans, putting their two main types of tank together. The Panzer III that we're seeing and the Panzer IV that was supposed to be an escort tank with a short-barreled 7.5cm gun. Now, inevitably, with tanks like the Tiger, we have a myth of the German superiority of tank design. 1930s, that is just not the case. They're struggling. The Top Gun 1939, he's captured lots of Czech tanks, and that helps him in his invasion of France, Belgium, and Holland in May of 1940. But these Panzer IIIs they've only got just sufficient for, they're looking at about 6 Panzer divisions. They wanted many more. The same with the Panzer IV as well. Now this vehicle, like many German vehicles we have in the collection, including our Tiger, it was purposely brought back to Britain so we could take it apart and analyse it. And why were we doing that? Number one, how do we defeat them? Are there weak spots? So with the Tiger, I mentioned 10 centimetre armour on the front. The armour on the sides and the rear is a lot less. There was no point us firing our 6-pounders to try and penetrate the front armour, but it could penetrate the side or the rear armour. The only good point about the 6-pounder that kind of contradicted myself, of course they did fire at the front of Tiger 131 and it jammed the turret, causing that crew, we think, to abandon the tank. So again, we do have to be careful when we're... So there was lots of other things tank crews were taught to do because they knew that, again, after the analysis of Tiger 131, they were up against something pretty serious when you're looking at a Tiger. Now, the L model has been followed around by another German vehicle, also captured in North Africa, also brought back for analysis, that weird little thing called the Kettenkrad, which was basically a tracked oddity. It's got a motorcycle wheel and handlebars at the front. They are not essential for it to actually steer and drive. You can actually use the steering wheel on it, as it were, and that will brake and turn the track as you're going along. Their tiny little vehicle is called the Daimler Dingo Scout Car. And the whole idea of the Dingo, you're small, you're quick, you can get up to about 55 miles an hour on the open road, 4-wheel drive, and you're a reconnaissance or a scouting vehicle. And you can go ahead of the main force, you radio back what you're seeing, with a view that you're not there for the fighting, they might give you a break gun to protect yourself, but you're there for capturing information. That's it. It was that effective. And you can see, look at the scale of it, it's tiny. And it also means when you're quick and small, you're a hard target to hit by the enemy. Now firing is almost like the big brother of the Scout car. This is the Daimler armoured car, the second vehicle going around with the turret on. So think of it as a souped-up Dingo, Daimler engine in the back, and this time with a bit more punch. The idea of having that 2-pounder gun, there's 2 ways you might be able to do reconnaissance. One way is by stealth, that's a Dingo, small, quiet, you're only going to be seen. The other way you can do reconnaissance is a way they sometimes call kicking the ante. Go and wake the enemy up, make them reveal their positions, give them a bit of a brassing up, as it was called, a bit of machine gun fire, make them fire back at you, make them have to reveal themselves. If you're going to do that, you want a bit more protection and probably a bit more firepower as well. And that's the idea behind the Daimler armoured car with this turret on there all the time. So with those vehicles, I mention them because it's an area, again, we always tend to talk about tanks. Actually, Britain was really good at wheeled armour in World War II, and these are vehicles that were the top of their class throughout the entire war. Now behind it, another armoured vehicle, the American half-track. Again, the Americans, in that period of experimentation in the 30s, they import a series of different types of half-track like this one. They're all given really confusingly, M1, M2, M3, M4, M5, just like the American tanks, the medium tank, M1, M2, M3, etc. Makes it confusing. This version is an M16, and it's a version with that anti-aircraft mount in the back. Something called a Maxton mount with 4 50 caliber machine guns on. And the idea being, this is a vehicle with the tracks. It means it can have more mobility than just a wheeled vehicle. And with those machine guns in the back, the idea was it was for close air defence. In other words, you were going to protect a column, your tanks, whatever else is advancing with those 450 caliber machine guns. Now, as most of you will know, if you know your World War II history, fairly shortly after the invasion in Normandy, most of the German air power was pretty imposing. We didn't really see that much. So vehicles like this, they realised, well, hang on, what are we doing with them then? Because what's the point if we're not really being attacked from the air that much? So if you look at the back of the vehicle, they can fold down some of the armour plate on it, and you can use those 450 caliber machine guns to fire in a ground attack role, so they can fire instead of up in the air at aeroplanes, you can fire at targets on the ground. And it was so effective, 450 caliber machine guns firing, they call it rather crudely a meat chopper. It would actually slide through pretty much anything. A 50 caliber round's pretty big. 55,000 of these half-tracks are made by the Americans, and yet again, one of those great stories of American production in World War II, that means they can supply not only their own army, but they can supply our army, Commonwealth armies. Again, some of these go to Russia as well. The Americans built one of the most numerous vehicles worldwide. The vehicle they built was the M113. It was an armoured personnel carrier used in Vietnam, used by the FMC, or built by the FMC, Food Manufacturing Corporation of America. At the moment, they're about 90,000 they've built over time. And the FMC company, they decided they were going to try and do a smaller, lighter version to sell as a reconnaissance vehicle, and this is it. It used to be joking. To operate the radios, and the driver, you can see with his head out, captain blowing in the front. And like all these armoured vehicles, one way to go on the open sea on it, first wave over the top, you sink like a stone. Which tries to keep the weight down so it's lightish armour, and again the idea in the 1960s, a lot of countries experimenting with aluminium alloys. It was all about weight. The lighter the vehicle you are, the more likely you can be air transportable. You don't need so much, or you've got more, as it were, capacity, less armour plate, or less weight on the armour plate, so the engine can be more powerful, give you speed, give you mobility. And that certainly you can see is the case with the Lynx, which is a very nippy little vehicle going around the place. The Dutch Army put different turrets on the top. They did different things with them. They're out of service now with the Canadian Army and the Dutch Army, but they've been, like so many armoured vehicles, you take up to scrap them, they're sold on. So some of these are now in service in Barbados, I think it is in South America. One example as well, you can just see how that vehicle works. The engine only powers two wheels on that vehicle. They're the wheels with the teeth on. And you call those the sprocket wheels. And the idea is that track is being laid down like its own road in front of the vehicle. The engine powers those two tooth wheels. They bite into the track and they pull that vehicle along the track. The wheels that are resting on the ground are not powered at all. They're just spreading the weight out over that track so it doesn't sink into the ground. Wheel at the back.
Russian.
The Russians after World War II built a tank called the T-54. They gave the plans to the Chinese, and the Chinese built a copy of it, and that's what this is. It's called a type tank. So a T-54 is a Russian tank or a Soviet-era tank. A type tank is the Chinese copy, so we call this a Type 59. wanted to build a more powerful tank than the T-34 with its 76mm gunner. And they come up with a design they call the T-44. But instead of putting it into mass production, which would have meant the factories having to close and retool, get ready for this new tank, they changed their mind and decided to actually build an evolution of the T-34, put a new turret on with a new gun and call it the T-34-85. Now the new design tank they did, this T-44, they built them in quite some numbers, but they don't see service until after the Second World War. And it's really almost the prototype for this type of frying pan-shaped turret Russian tank that we're so used to. The T-54 is mass-produced, along with the T-55. About 80,000, they think, have been made over time. Huge numbers of them, and made in many other factories, not just in Russia. So they were exported, licenses were given, or permission to build in other Soviet or Eastern Bloc countries under the communist sort of thumb, as it were. And this particular one, this is made in China. But it's even more confusing because it's got a British gun on. That's because Britain offered the L7 105mm gun.
Patrz.
Now the American M60 is marked just like Russians, evolution rather than revolution. The one is called the Latin family of tanks. They went to start just after the war, M47, M48, then the M60. They look very similar. They're just got a new number of the cars, so their shapes are very similar. Now I mentioned earlier that Type 59, a copy of the T-54. This is another later era Cold War Soviet Army tank coming on now. This is the T-72. And again, it's another one of those, we all think the communist era, the Soviet government were very disciplined, they were very command economy, almost like a dictatorship. Actually, like most countries, they still had rivalries, personality differences, and different tank factories that really hated each other. And what happened is the Soviets come up with a modern tank, very radical, called the T-64 tank. A rival factory in the Urals, in a place called Nizhny Tagil, decided they were going to build a rival to the T-64. And they were so good at doing it, even the Russian minister, when he went to visit them, saw it there, he was going to take them after doing it rather than the T-64. There's a sandwich of explosives between pieces of metal. It triggers the sandwich to go off, and the blast effect goes back out. So it's great against things that hollow charge round, things like RPG. And the T-72 was a cheaper tank than its rival tank, the T-64. You could buy at the time, if you had some money, 1.2 million for your brand new T-72 tank. tank gun next to it, and the idea, keep the enemy soldiers heads down while your infantry are debussing and finishing the attack on foot. And the Warrior was designed to be able to keep up with the British Challenger 1 and then the Challenger 2 tanks in service now. This is the Challenger 1 coming on. We were less worried about mobility at the time. That's what we learned from World War II. And what happens is we have a complex tank being designed to replace the Chieftain. It's going to be called MPT-80. The problem is it had lots of technical problems and we weren't getting very far with it. Now at the same time, of course, they were designing a tank for the Shah of Iran. He spent a huge amount of money up the road and Jersey, British establishments, designed or redesigned engine in the back, much more reliable than the earlier Chieftain engine, and also it's got what they call hydrogas suspension. This is a tank that can go fast across country, and again, faster you are, the faster you get. Warrior, Challenger 1 was replaced by Challenger 2. Warrior still in service.